Hey guys, welcome back to the Melanin Matter podcast. Today we are going to be talking about the Black Lives Matter movement and kind of its effects on us personally and also the Black community overall. Some of the topics that we're going to be touching on today and discussing include what the Black Lives Matter movement really is and where it came from, our personal experiences within our own countries, or the places we live in, so in England and Hong Kong and here in Sweden. We're also going to be talking a little bit about the community and how the support that we've gotten or the lack of support that we've gotten, for example, but also the social media aspects of it. Yeah.
We kind of want to do like a brief introduction of what the Black Lives Matter movement is and kind of like what we mean when we talk about it, just because it just makes sense to explain that so we all know that we're talking about the same thing. But I think for us, what the Black Lives Matter movement really is about empowering both Black people and kind of letting everyone know that our lives matter just as much as anyone else's lives. And I think that, at least the way I see it, is that this movement was kind of created in order to shed a light on how many people were being killed especially during quarantine. There were quite a lot of killings, sadly, and I think it was kind of to shed light on that and also to kind of show the outrage that this isn't normal and that things need to change. Obviously on like a let's not kill us scale, but also on a let's treat us fairly in workplaces and, you know, in every form of kind of life in some ways, like getting a house, stuff like that. Like those can be a little bit more difficult for Black people. And obviously this is a movement that started especially in the US because of what has been happening over there. And obviously with their gun laws, it's a lot easier to kill Black people, I would say, like that. But I think the movement kind of stretched out to a lot of predominantly white areas as well, and kind of uplifting Black people in those areas as well. Not to say that there haven't been any issues in a lot of countries in Africa, because there have been, but I think it's just, especially in areas where it's predominantly white, Black people tend to have a disadvantage. So it's kind of shedding light again on that and kind of bringing forward these issues and attempting to tackle them. At least that's how we understand Black Lives Matter. The next thing we kind of want to talk about was our countries and cities' kind of reaction to Black Lives Matter. I know a lot of countries and cities especially have done kind of protests or like signing petitions and stuff like that. Petitions are kind of more online, but in terms of protests, those were usually organized by people within cities and stuff like that. I was in Hong Kong during that time, and there was one protest that was in the making, but then it actually got canceled because of Hong Kong police. Obviously, as you guys may know, Hong Kong is kind of going through a tough time in general with protests, and so it's kind of hard to have a protest in general in Hong Kong. So I think the idea of having a Black Lives Matter protest, even if it was going to be a peaceful protest, didn't really appeal to the Hong Kong police in case things went south. I don't know, but it got cancelled, which was really sad. So nothing really happened in Hong Kong in order to show support for Black Lives Matter movement, which I found really sad, but definitely, yeah, that's what's been happening in Hong Kong.
Sweden, it's been kind of the same in the sense that it's like we haven't really had a lot of activity or like protests happening here. I know that there was a few, like maybe like 2 or 3 across the country, but that was just like in the beginning of quarantine, like March or whatever, not March, in like the beginning of the summer. But other than that, we haven't really had anything here, not since I've been here anyway. But in Canada where I was, there were like protests all the time, and different like sit-ins that were happening that I did attend quite a lot. So like you could definitely feel the difference between those 2 places where I was at anyway.
Yeah, no, I think being in England, London during the height of the Black Lives Matter protest, I'd say it's probably not like Canada scale. It was like there were loads in London, there were protests in like Nottingham, like all like the big cities. There were like always organized protests, and like quite a few of them. I think you had to, like, if you didn't notice that there was a lot of going on, like I don't know. Like, I don't know where you were living. Like, it was very prominent in the UK that there was this whole protest that was going on. Like, I know that it was on the news. And I think one big thing that happened was the protesters, I think it was in Bristol, they knocked over one of the old statues that was there for like years and years and years of Churchill, because he was like the prime minister and he was good and he helped out. That sounds really bad, but like he was the prime minister, but he'd also said like racist things in the past, and I think like the protesters obviously didn't agree with having a historical figure who also kind of condoned and said racist things, so they knocked it into the river, and there was a lot of discussion over. He was the prime minister of the UK, of England, like, and he helped out during like World War II, very prominent figure. But then he also had like this controversial side, and it was like, what do we do with that kind of? What do we do with that situation? So yeah, it escalated, and it was very prominent in the UK, which obviously was a good thing because it shed light on it. I hope that everyone kind of acknowledged that this was happening.
Like even people outside the UK were able to see. I saw quite a lot of posts about it as well, because on social media there was quite a lot of videos and like meme accounts were sharing it and stuff like that as well. So I definitely got some footage of that for sure.
Yeah, it was big. It was really, really big. We went out to like Trafalgar Square and everything. So yeah, there was definitely protests. And I went up to Nottingham in like July, I think, maybe like late July, and there was still like a banner that said Black Lives Matter, which is really nice to see, because obviously movement kind of dies down and maybe people don't think about it as much, but it was still there even after it happened, which kind of is like a good thing, you know, because they still matter.
Yeah, I feel like that's important, because I feel like in a lot of places it's been so active for like a short period of time, and then suddenly like it all just kind of blew over, and then like nobody's really doing anything about it anymore.
Well, at least it was active for some shorter time in your places, because lol, in all honesty, there's a lot of activity at all, to be honest.
Yeah, so that's like nice to see that there's still like a little bit at least.
I think like, yeah, in terms of like the community's reaction, how would you say the Black Lives Matter movement helped? Because I think, in my opinion, obviously, as I said in the beginning, it kind of helped like shed light about a lot of the issues that Black people face, and kind of show people that this is not just us being oversensitive. I feel like that's a word that ends up coming up quite a lot, that we're just dramatic, sensitive about stuff. And I think that people don't understand the different barriers to entry in a lot of different sectors, whether that's, you know, again, like family or even like getting a house, getting a job, stuff like that. And the difficulties that are placed upon Black people are there, and people sometimes don't realize that since they're not Black, they've never had that experience. So it's not something that naturally comes to them like, oh, I completely understand that. But I think that the way it was shared across like social media, and that it was seen by everyone across the world, one, it started conversations, and like it made people think about, you know, either judgments that they had in the past, or, you know, ways that they felt they could improve, because they didn't realize that a lot of the stuff that they were doing was wrong. So I think that was great. I think there was definitely a lot of people buying books to educate themselves about it. Like it was shown that a lot of these books were getting sold out and stuff like that. On top of that, there were a lot of videos going around to help, like videos with ads on them, so that you could help generate money to go towards charities. And that's another great thing, is charities, the money that's been going there. A lot of petitions were signed as well that helped create change. So I think there's been a lot of positive change thanks to the Black Lives Matter movement. Anything else that you guys can think of that I didn't mention?
I was saying like big companies like Apple, I remember they did like a Black music kind of segment on Apple Music, where all day they just played like uplifting Black music or music from Black artists. And even on Netflix, I think it's still there, they've got like the Black Lives Matter collection, and they've just got like a bunch of movies amplify Black voices or show kind of like Black struggle, for example, like Moonlight or
13th. That was a movie that I watched as well.
13th. Yeah, that's a really, really good one. Yeah, so like a bunch of just shows. Selma, all of that. What were you saying, Scout?
No, I was just going to say that I feel like a lot of people have, from the Black Lives Matter movement, like now a lot of people have begun to like educate themselves more, which is also like really important. And like, as you said, Natalia, like buying books, watching movies, but just like getting to know like, oh, like these are black owned businesses that they might have not like known before. Like a lot of those kinds of things are important, I feel like, which is like a positive effect from this.
Yeah, no, I agree. I feel like I also learned as well because I
Definitely.
assumed kind of that everyone knew that being black was going to be a little bit of a disadvantage, like the workplace and things like that. But then speaking to my friends, some of them are like, actually, no, I didn't really realize that. So I think I learned in the fact that stuff that I take as, everyone knows that common knowledge is not common knowledge, if that makes sense. Like people
Yeah,
have to teach
Yeah.
themselves these things.
I agree.
But
But
yeah.
also in terms of like what I was thinking was a lot of businesses, like very big businesses, have started taking kind of accountability as well about their actions and trying to better their business models and stuff like that to include more
Yeah.
black people into their businesses as well, which I find that's been great. And a lot of I've been on obviously on YouTube a lot because that's what I do and stuff like that. But I have been watching a lot of YouTubers, and a lot of them have been using their ad revenue to go as well towards black charities that support Black Lives Matter, as well as a lot of YouTubers just kind of putting forward black owned businesses so that it kind of creates more awareness towards that. And I think even like Kylie Jenner, for instance, like promoted clothing from a
Mm,
black owned business. And like you can hate Kylie Jenner, but at least she's doing a good job at getting exposure for like these black owned businesses, and those help the brands
yeah.
tremendously, obviously. So I think there's been a lot
Yeah,
of
no.
positive change from the Black
Yeah,
Lives
no,
Matter movement.
definitely. Even like just people realizing that there's so much more that they can do. Because I feel like
Yeah.
a lot of people that I've spoken to and like I've seen around, like a lot of them might think like, oh, but there's nothing really that I
Yeah.
can do. But there's like
Yeah.
a lot of people can do more than they think,
I
which
know, and
a lot
I
of
think
people
for
realize.
me, it was really like I found it really endearing and really like heartwarming. Like some of my friends, like one of my closest friends, she was really getting into it and she was studying it and going around like educating other people about it from the research that she had done, and it was like asking me to help her out in terms, I don't know, like sharing knowledge of her. And I think that's just it's so great to have friends that are willing and
Mm.
happy to do that and to want to educate themselves as well. Because I think education and knowledge is the most important thing, because what can you do if you don't understand and take the time to understand the situation? So yeah, the petitions are great, especially there was a petition that was going around trying to get the colonization to be part of the curriculum, which I think is so important because that goes back like way back to our empires and everything. I think it's so important to learn it because young black children will learn that actually before colonization and before slavery and everything, there were like thriving, successful empires with kings and queens in Africa that were doing like so well for colonization and before they all got colonized and everything. But it's so great to learn that Africa was so successful and before all of the bad colonization, slavery, everything happened to them. So it's so good to like hear about your home country in like a positive light in
Yeah.
history, rather than just learning about we were slaves and
Yeah.
everything like that.
No, exactly. I think a lot of people are starting to realize that history in itself is very much white centric and not really a
Yeah,
diverse perspective in some ways. It's usually just this perspective of the person who decides to write it down. So I think that, yeah, it's important to realize that, history is just a perspective. It's not really like set in stone. It's just you'll find a different perspective for any sort of, piece of history, if that makes sense. But in terms of how it didn't help, I would say there are definitely a lot of is rallies the word? I mean, kind of peaceful protests that started out peaceful that then didn't end up being peaceful. A lot of looting as well. I think there were a few videos where black owned businesses were getting as well kind of being part of the looting, which kind of sucked for them as well. And I don't know, there was like a few tensions, but then obviously I feel like those were kind of focused too much on the media rather than the peaceful protests, and usually kind of hypersensitized and kind of like shown extra on like
yeah,
an unnecessary amount to people to kind of give us the illusion that Black Lives Matter as a movement was like this huge flawed movement, which, you know, obviously there's going to be extremists in every single movement, but I think that as a whole, I think it was more positive than it was negative, and I think that it did a lot more good than bad.
Yeah, agreed. I guess it's just the way that the media framed it. I know in London there were like people that went out to protest against the statues being taken down, and there was still
video of all those white men who were so mad, and they were like, no.
I know. It was crazy, and they were saying that they were there to like protect the statues and like other stuff, but there was
I think
videos of them.
Another bad point altogether about Black Lives Matter is that it kind of let the people who were secretly racist before be openly racist and confident about it. So I think that that's something that, you know, people felt very comfortable doing. Now they're like, oh, well, now since we're all saying our opinions, I'm going to say my opinion too. And especially in the US, like it's horrible how like extreme. I think there's this one white man there's a video of him just holding up a Black Lives Matter sign, and so many white people who were driving cars just stopped to tell him, well, you know what? All lives matter, or white lives matter, or fuck you in general. And I'm like, go about your life. Like, why do you need to stop just to say something rude and mean and just like, for what? What does it bring you? It's like, some of these people are just negative for the sake of it. And I'm like, how does Black Lives Matter threaten your life? That's how I'm kind of like curious. Like, I don't understand that.
I literally can't understand it either. It's like completely, I can just like seeing all those like videos like going viral of just people becoming so like defensive when it doesn't even like affect them that way. It's like, but why?
Good point. I mean, how did you guys feel kind of like, obviously it was so great that there was people, you know, taking time to learn, and a lot of activism happening around social media, but how did you guys feel with just like watching like the videos and seeing like the bad comments and just like the whole aspect of it and your mental health?
No, definitely stressful, because I would literally like take a step back and just think like to myself and reflect, like, I know that it's like not me personally like being there like watching it like firsthand, or like not like somebody that I actually know, but it still like hurts like a lot. I was like surprised about how like mentally like affected like I became. And like still, even like every time I see like this, like I honestly just feel like crying like sometimes. It's so it's very stressful.
Completely agree. I completely agree. I think seeing the videos, racist, and this isn't a criticism or anything, but maybe they have the ability to kind of, you know, kind of have that a little bit of detachment. But I think when you're watching it and you're like the same skin color as the person that is being, you know, held down on the floor with someone's knee on their neck, and you can imagine like that being your siblings or your father or your cousin or whatever, I think you do have like an emotional attachment to it. And when you keep on seeing that kind of video, it's so good, because obviously it's spreading awareness, but it does hurt, and it is stressful and emotional watching that and seeing like nasty comments, or kind of like comments that just racist comments basically. Like they hurt too.
I think for me, especially like at the beginning, it was definitely tough in the sense that like it makes you feel obviously very much like there's nothing you can do. Especially at the beginning, I felt like even if I were to sign petitions, that like I could not in some ways save another life because I'm not there, you know. And hearing those people like beg for their lives, or even, you know, it's hard, you know, because you're like, well, that could have been any relative that I know. It could have been me. And like, I can't even imagine that fear as well when you're at the kind of end of your life and you're begging for someone to save you, someone who's meant to save you, like the actual police, and that nothing is being done. And I think that was the first wave that kind of made me feel super stressed. And then I kind of got angry. I was like, it's really annoying me how people are talking back in the comments. Some people trying to justify in some ways why he was killed. Like, oh, well, he had drugs in his system. Oh, well, do we give a shit? I'm sorry, but he died. Like, he did not have to die from
Yeah.
drugs in him.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry, Peter, but when you're in your fucking party taking drugs, I doubt anybody's out here saying that, like, you deserve to die for it. I'm just saying, you know, like, it's just,
Yeah.
to me, it's crazy, because, like, even when you compare, like, news outlets for, like, a white boy shooting up schools, it's like, oh, well, he's a tortured soul, you know? But then the second it's a black kid who gets like shot down, immediately it's just kind of like, oh, well, you know, he looked like a man, he looked scary, he had a hoodie on,
Yeah.
like, what was he doing out late at night? What do you think a teenager's doing late at night? Going home, maybe? I don't know. Usually it's not, I don't know. It's just immediately that assumption that, like, there's something criminal about what we were doing, and therefore that kind of justifies the death that happened. And I think that, to me, is just horrifying. And everything that came after that, you know, after people realized that, okay, sharing videos of people dying is just kind of horrible, and that we should kind of stop doing that, kind of came this, like, new wave of, like, trying to inform people. And that's when I started really reposting as much as I could about, like, information and stuff like that. And again, the opposition to stuff like that was just insane. It's just kind of like, oh, well, are you sure that it's like this? Are you sure it's, like, not, you know, just a problem about something else, and it's not nothing to do with people's skin color? And I'm like, well, unless you have experienced it yourself, you don't know, because it's easy to judge from the outside if you haven't experienced it yourself. I can't say that I've experienced everything that a black person who's dark skinned in America who's poor has experienced. I grew up in a wealthy neighborhood. I grew up mixed as well as that. And on top of that, like, I have a great education. I have, like, practically everything at my disposal in order to kind of, like, succeed in life. You know, like, I don't have the same experience as someone in America who's struggling to kind of get out and make a living for themselves. So I can't relate to that, but I can sympathize, I can empathize in some ways. And the fact that so many people are kind of so against it and they don't even want to acknowledge that they have any sort of privilege, to me is just insane, because everybody has some sort of privilege. So why is it so hard for you to acknowledge that you have some sort of privilege? And one of those privileges is the fact that you don't have any disadvantages because of your skin. That's all it is. Nobody's saying, well, you're privileged. And no one's saying that you have life easy. We're just saying that your life isn't as hard. You just don't have that negative aspect added on top. And I think that's what a lot of people find it so hard to, like, grasp. And it really, I don't know, it really pissed me off. And I think that, at least my take is that at first I was just so wrapped up in it. And then after a while, I just couldn't kind of deal with people asking, in some ways, like, questions that were just like, ugh, I just couldn't deal with it. I was like, I can't be bothered to have conversations with people like this over and over again about whether our lives matter, whether our experiences exist, whether they're, like, valid or not. It's like, well, who are you to tell me that my experiences aren't valid, or that the experiences of this man over here is, like, aren't valid? Like, I don't understand that. So after a while, it just came to a point where I was like, I cannot be bothered anymore. I just want to be focused on doing something productive rather than just having conversations with people who want to argue with you for the sake of arguing with you.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it shouldn't be your job, anyone's job, like any of us, to have to sit there and educate them and, like, answer all their dumb questions. I'm sorry, but they're stupid. Like,
no, but
like, it's not our job. Like,
on the internet, like, just plain and simple.
I know. Look it up, read, literally learn, listen, instead of just, like, arguing back and forth when you're wrong. Like, it's not our job to...
They don't think they're wrong, so I can understand that. Like, okay, you don't think you're wrong, fine. But take it up with someone who gives a shit. I'm sorry, but, like, really, like, don't... Why are you coming to me with these conversations expecting me to come up with these answers for you? Like, I'm not here at your disposal, you know? I have other stuff going on in my life that I want to be doing rather than discuss whether my life matters to you or not. Like, I'm sorry, but...
Definitely.
I have other things to do. Like, I just can't be bothered with conversations like that anymore.
I mean, like, for me, no, I agree. I would never comment on the life or the lived experience of like a gay black person, because I'm not, like, okay, I'm black, but I'm not gay, so I can't comment on their lived experience. So I can't really wrap my head around people kind of like saying, "Oh no, but like that doesn't happen to them," or they can't experience that. Like the UK is not homophobic. The UK is not racist because I haven't experienced it. You can't tell someone what their lived experience is like when you are not that person. Like you can't
Yeah.
experience how their life is like. You don't have those attributes. I would never comment on someone else's life because I can't see what their life is or ever view the world through their eyes because I'm not them, or I'm part of that attributes that contribute to their experience, So I just don't understand people that can question or try and doubt or,
Yeah.
just not accept the privilege that they have. And are just constantly trying to tear it down and say, no, I'm not, but you are.
Yeah,
you know?
no.
I just
Literally.
No,
Like,
yeah.
I don't understand.
It's just like it's so
Sorry.
almost like stressful and like infuriating because they think that they can speak for people on that level when they like really can't.
Yeah.
So instead of like trying to speak for someone, like just like
listen.
try and understand and educate and learn and listen,
Yeah.
It's
I just don't understand how people can hate like hate someone so much just because of their skin color. I just will never understand that.
I
Like you
think, like,
can't help what skin color you're born with.
yeah, I don't think what they hate necessarily is the skin color. I think what they hate is all the stereotypes linked with that skin color, and I think that's their own prejudices that they have to like break down. But I think that's why so many people kind of are like, oh well, I'm not racist, because they're like, oh well, this black person is fine. But then it's like you have to kind of debunk what you mean when you think of black people altogether, and exactly why you have prejudices, why you maybe have prejudices that you don't even realize, and kind of tackling them, because everybody has like prejudices. That's how we live in a world. We kind of take something and we simplify it so that it makes sense to us immediately when we see it, and that's normal. But for people to have negative prejudices, for instance, that you can debunk. You can, like, it's not impossible to do it. And I think people have to kind of distance themselves from like this image of like, oh well, everybody's attacking me in this like victim narrative, and kind of go from there and be like, well, it doesn't matter because I used to think this, and I used to think that it was fine to think this, and then I learned from it and grew from it, and no one's going to condemn you for growing as a person, I think people just don't want to change in some ways, because change, I guess, can be scary to people, or they don't want to acknowledge that they ever did something wrong, and everybody in their life has done something wrong. So we're not all saints here. Like, I'm not advocating saying that I never did anything wrong in my life, but I can take accountability for that and acknowledge it and kind of like move forward. And it's not like you have to apologize to the world if you said a racist remark 10 years ago or something like that, unless people are like, oh well, you said that's kind of weird. Fine, but like if nobody's attacking you personally on what you're doing, then like just take the information that you have and grow from it. You don't have to turn this into like, oh well, everybody's kind of attacking white people at the minute. It's like, no, we're not attacking white people. I'm sorry, but like it's not about that. It's about so much more than just that. So the fact that people just kind of take it as that really gets on my nerves. Really gets on my nerves, because it's not about you. I'm sorry, but it's not about you. Thank you guys for listening to this episode of the Melanin Matter, and we'll be coming with you guys with a part 2, and that will either come out next week or earlier, depending on what we decide. We haven't fully decided yet, because we basically had a very long episode and had to split it in 2 because that's what you guys voted on Instagram. But I will see you guys very soon again, and we'll be continuing with this conversation and talking a little bit more deeply about how Black Lives Matter affected us in our personal lives with friends and stuff like that. So stay tuned for when the part 2 is going to be out. Bye!